To introduce, certainly we've met Denis a few times now at subcommittee or committee meetings. Denis Farr comes to us from Burlington. Welcome, Denis. He'll be our legislative assistant for audit and finance. Good morning, Denis. Thank you. And I'm also going to mention that Brian McMullen is acting general manager today for Mr. Sierra. Welcome, Denis. Thank you, and everyone is here. Mr. Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda today?
Madam Chair, I have one change to the agenda. There are updates to the outstanding business list. For item J, audit of City of Hamilton utilities, the current due date is May 25th, 2015. Staff has proposed a new due date of August 12th, 2015. In addition, item Q, inspection and testing of fire hydrants for condominium properties, has now been completed and requires removal.
Thank you. I'm going to move on then. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Aidan Johnson, second by Councillor Brenda Johnson. All in favor? Carried. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? Seeing none, thank you. And may I have an approval of the minutes of the previous meeting of April 13th? Moved by Councillor Vanderbeek, second by Councillor Pizzuto. All in favor? Carried. We have no delegation requests today. I'm going to move right into consent items. There are 7 of them, and I'm going to go through them individually. On consent item 5.1, questions or comments? I have a motion to receive the report. I'm just waiting. I see pages flipping. Moved by Councillor Brenda Johnson, second by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favor? And I should just, for the viewing public, because some may be listening to this, this is the 2015 first quarter request for tenders and proposals report. So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Item 5.2 is the 2015 first quarter emergency and non-competitive procurements report. Any questions or comments on that? Councillor Ferguson?
I've been an advocate for getting competitive bids on everything we receive, and there's still a number of them happening here. And it's nice to get reported to us, I appreciate that, but there seems to be an awful lot of them. Is there any attention through you to the right staff person? I don't know who it is. Is there any attention put on the department that requests these non-competitive bids to challenge them on why they're doing this? I know we get into a lot of them in public works, but generally around bus parts where you want to use original parts versus aftermarket parts. But I want to know whether or not we have, I see Rick coming down, you probably the perfect guy to ask. So Rick, does your staff put tension back on these departments for not going through the competitive process, or simply by filling out the correct form and it gets approved is the way we go?
Through you, Madam Chair. The forms on this particular report are the policy 11, we call it non-competitive and the emergency. Council authorized the change in the process. The GM authorizes those, but they are reviewed after the fact by procurement, and if there's any issues with them, they're addressed with the department.
So I think I heard the answer, and I'm sorry, I got a cold. I think the answer I heard was it's the GM that approves them and procurement just processes them. So procurement doesn't provide oversight or challenge any of these requests for non-competitive bids.
The oversight is provided by a review after the fact, and corrective action is taken if required, but we ensure that the documentation that's been provided for any of these things substantiate that it was proper use of that policy.
Okay, I just want to think about that some more. Thank you.
So, Councillor, I'll leave it that you'll speak offline about that, and possibly the next report that comes forward will have your questions answered. And can I have a mover and second then to receive this? Councillor Ferguson moved, second by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. 5.3 is the 2015 first quarter non-compliance procurement policy report. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm sure Councillor Ferguson will be discussing this further with staff. Moved by Councillor Pizzuto, second by Councillor Aidan Johnson. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. 5.4 is the 2015 budget submissions for the volunteer advisory committees. Any questions or comments? Moved by Councillor Brenda Johnson, second by Councillor Artie Vanderbeek. All in favor? And that's a moving approval, correct? Got that? Thank you. And 5.5 is the Aboriginal Advisory Committee meeting minutes. Yep, just a moment. There are two minutes, March 5th, 2015 and March 19th, 2015. Councillor Aidan Johnson.
Thank you. Just a very quick thing I'd like to mention, Madam Chair. Given that the minutes for the Aboriginal Advisory committee meeting indicate our Aboriginal Advisory Committee's receipt and acknowledgement and pleasure with the Council's new Indigenous Justice Strategy. The update I want to provide is this. The witness blanket, which is referred to in our Indigenous Justice Strategy, is coming to Hamilton with fixed dates, and I'm pleased to be able to report those dates. As you know, Madam Chair, the witness blanket is a First Nations created artwork, a huge wall-sized artwork commemorating the residential school experience in Canada. Later this month, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is reporting to the federal government on the federal government's responsibilities around the residential school history. And to mark the release of the Truth and Reconciliation report, our city, in cooperation with McMaster and Mohawk and the Hamilton Community Foundation, our good friends, are pooling some funds and some energy and some resources, and we're bringing the witness blanket to the second floor of the Central Library July 21st through to August the 30th. So that's a good few weeks in which the witness blanket will be on display. And right now, our witness blanket committee is working on creating programming to bring in students, Indigenous community members, non-Indigenous community groups for curated tours and visits with the witness blanket. And I think that's going to be a very nice springboard for some conversations and education in the city this summer. And that's the fruition of work that our Aboriginal Advisory Committee has been doing. So I just want to kind of add that to our receipt of the report from Aboriginal Advisory. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Councillor Johnson, and I know you've been passionately involved with this, so thank you very, very much, and I look forward to seeing it as well. So on the minutes, may I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Johnson, Councillor Robert Basuda, all in favor? Carried. That's the two meetings. Item 5.6 now is tax appeals under sections 357 and 358 of the Municipal Act. Any questions or comments? Moved. The recommendation be approved. Councillor Brenda Johnson, Councillor Aidan Vanderbeek, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Then 5.7 is the Treasurer's write-off of taxes under Section 354 of the Municipal Act 2001, their properties in wards 12 and 13. Questions or comments? Councillor Vanderbeek, you have no questions, just moving it, or moving the recommendation. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Vanderbeek, second by Councillor Aidan Johnson. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Moving on now to item 8.1 is the Treasurer's investment. Sorry, my apologies. Going to go to 6. Actually, public hearings and delegations we have none today. Presentations we have none today. Now we get to 8.1, and it's the Treasurer's Investment Report 2014 fiscal year by Aon Hewitt. And questions, comments, Councillor Johnson, I recommend first.
Thank you. This question is to Mr. Wojciechak. When I was reading through this, I thought I was reading a good news report. Maybe you'd like to give us the Coles note, please.
Yes, it is a good news report. We've done well. We hit our benchmark, or exceeded the benchmark. Okay.
Sorry, I know your forte is the management of money and doing it quite well. So just want to hear the good news.
Okay, the returns were about 2% over for the reserve account. This only handles the reserve of the future fund, basically. Was about 2% greater than the benchmark return,
Right.
which is a good news. We made 2% more than expected by virtue of having longer bonds rather than short bonds, and interest rates going down, so prices went up. And this is a report showing all-in return. Okay. The future fund, given we've been deferring money for a long time and only
Right.
very short,
Yeah.
did almost hit its benchmark. It was a little lower, but it was all in short term. We have, I believe it's about 19 million in there. That's scheduled to go out for the Pan Am Stadium. So it's been rolling at very low rates of interest versus longer term bonds. So we couldn't hit our benchmark, but we came very close. In terms of the Devonshire, which may be what, I'm not sure if that's what you're questioning, the Devonshire asset-backed commercial paper was matured. I know the report says sold, but in essence, that's what happened.
Right.
It's held in a public market security. It was repurchased through court order. We've been, I guess, 6 years this has been going on. And finally went to the Supreme Court, got rejected, and came back down to the lower Superior Court in Ontario, who made a judgment. And it was a negotiated deal on a restructuring of the Devonshire Trust with the Case Central pension plan was involved in that, because they were a major player in the
Right.
asset-backed commercial paper market. And we got a full recovery of the 10 million,
Right.
which would be a 9.91 million original cost,
Right.
plus interest to September of 2007, September 24, I believe was the date. And also there is ongoing, as part of the restructuring. I mean, mechanically what happened was the custodian accepted payment of $10 million, and we have another agreement, so the security was taken off of the list of public market securities and paid out in full, etc. There is a rider and the court monitor is monitoring the pool of assets. There's 3 pools. One is for taxes, based on this restructuring. Another is for unknown claims that may occur in the next 2 years. And the third one is for basically the monitor fees. And that stands at about 69 million. And we have, as a prorated share of that pool, 10 million out of the, about 600 or 700 million of this was, Devonshire was actually outstanding. We get 1.195%. Which gives you a range of from $1,100, $1,200 to 774, I believe was the number. I'm just remembering. So that's to be seen, and the expectations from the monitor is that they haven't received a no from the Canadian Tax Authority, so they're optimistic that they will get a favorable rating and not have a tax liability. Which is the major part of that pooling, which would give it closer to the higher number, basically of, say, 500 to 700,000, depending on interim, I guess, claims, and how long it drags out in terms of monitor costs and legal costs for running this side pool. Is there another specific?
Thank you very much. You put a lot of work into this report, and you put a lot of work into your work. So I really wanted to highlight some of the good things that are happening, and thank you very much for the report.
Thank you, Brett.
Appreciate it, and I want to move it at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Brenda Johnson, second by Councillor Aidan Johnson. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Now we're going to go on to item 8.2 is a request to refund development charges to the YFC Youth Unlimited 273 Parkside Drive. I know Mr. Clerk has an amendment here, and I guess should we just turn to staff and ask what the changes are? Holly, can you answer that? I'm just noticing, maybe you have to explain also. Oh, you're not aware of it. Okay, just a second, I've got you. Denise, can you just advise, because I'm just asking Brian if he's aware of these changes. So, is it just information?
Madam Chair, this was received from Youth Unlimited, and it's just some updates to that document. You've already received the document in your agenda, but this is updated and you'll see the numbers in red. And I did not receive enough copies for the public, but I will be making copies and it will be updated online.
But does this affect, and I'm not sure if staff aren't aware, does this affect the bottom line of the refund being asked for? Mr. Mullen, does he have that yet? I just want to be sure. Whoever wishes to answer it. Come on down. Sorry, this is just handed to us, so I just want to be sure everybody's had a chance to understand it before we approve something that we really haven't read. You want to stand at the microphone there and identify yourself, please? Sorry.
Hi, I'm Arlene Rehmeyer from Youth Unlimited. I just wanted to update since March 1st the differences of what was submitted. That was all. It's just on the front page what is in red.
So this does not change anything. Thank you.
No.
Just want to be sure
change anything. Yeah.
So thank you very much for that clarification. So Councillor Collins. Oh, sorry. I had Councillor Brenda Johnson first, then for
No, I was just going to move the correspondence and
that we received the correspondence. Thank you. Second by Councillor Ferguson. All in favor? Thank you. And then on the item, on the recommendation, moved by Councillor Collins and Councillor Johnson. Did you have a question to it?
No,
please.
Comment just to let everyone know that the area councillor is fully supportive of this. This is a community-wide benefit. So just wanted to put that out there that this is a group that actually benefits the entire community. It brings a lot of good programs in. So Councillor Partridge wanted to relay that message.
Thank you. And unfortunately, she couldn't be here today, or she would be, but thank you very much. So it's moved by Councillor Collins, second by Councillor Brenda Johnson. All in favor?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you, everyone. Now we're going to go on to item 8.3. Okay, can I just say which one it is? Thank you. It's just for the viewing public. I'd like them to know where we're at. It's the request regarding development charge deferral agreement number 122, Countrywide Recycling Inc. at 900 Nebo Road. And Councillor Johnson, I have you wishing to question?
I'd like to move a motion that we implement the staff recommendation of the one-year period.
So you're moving, Councillor Johnson, Johnson, you're moving the recommendation. That's Schedule A, correct?
Yes.
Staff's recommendation. Thank you. So that's on the floor. I have a seconder. I'm seeing hands here, so I know I have Councillor Johnson, who is the ward councillor. It's seconded by Councillor Arnie Vanderbeek. Councillor Johnson is the ward councillor. I'll go to you.
Thank you. Sorry, yes, this is in my ward, and it's owned by the Bortman family. If everybody understands that name, I think they'll understand what good family they are. This was a project that came into the Glenbrook Red Hill Industrial Park about 6-7 years ago, I believe, 5 years ago. And they deferred the DCs, and then in that time of the 5-year deferral, they had some financial situations where they had to buy out the partner, and they're trying to get the business to come around another way. I would like to respectfully ask the group to look at the 5-year plan. I just finished talking to the owners just before this meeting, and this is the one that they could afford a lot better. And before I make any more comments, I just want to go through staff for a minute, please. What's the hardship if we go with the 5-year plan and not the 1-year plan?
So through the chair, so what would this, the option that was presented was something that we'd done in the past with another location within Hamilton when we did a deferral agreement.
As 1 year, correct?
Oh, 1 year, yes.
Okay.
So the hardship, it would just be extending the interest over a longer period of time.
So through you to staff, if we did it for a 5-year plan, is the city out a whole lot of money or any money, or is this just going to delay when we finally get all the money?
It will delay when we get our money.
But we'll still get our money. It'll just go over a 5-year plan. Okay, so I'm going to respectfully ask my colleagues to look at the 5-year plan, please. I don't want us to be on the front page of the newspaper saying we're not friendly for businesses, and we've done the 1-year plan before. I don't think this is going to set a dangerous precedence. I think that it's to help the businesses move into the right direction. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'm just going to refresh that we have a mover and a seconder for staff's recommendation, Schedule A. I have Councillor Collins and Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. It does say in the report that if we extended another 5 years, that we do set a precedent. So can I get some understanding as to how many times we have approved 2 5-year deferrals through you?
Through the chair, I'm not aware that we've had an extension of 5 years. We have some examples in the report, I think, where we've done a 1-year extension. So this would set a precedent for future deferral agreements.
And to be clear, the 5-year deferral, there's a benefit to that. I mean, the fact that we're offering the interest rate of 3.5 is much lower than the alternative, which is if it's on the tax roll, is it 15% 3.5, Madam Chairman?
Through the chair, I think the rate's a little bit lower, but it is a benefit to the business, yes.
Right, so,
And the tax rate on outstanding tax accounts and
Sorry, the tax rate, because Councillor Collins was just asking, I'm just trying to remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure of that actual rate.
I think it's 12 or 13%.
I thought it was about 1.5 to 1.5.
So how many DC referral agreements do we have in place right now, active ones, do we know, through you, Madam Chairman?
Through the chair, no, I'm not aware of that number at this time.
Well, my concern is that, as the report suggests, we are setting precedent, and I'm not certain what prevents others from coming forward to suggest that on a low-interest payment plan, they come forward to the municipality, and we're talking about substantial sums of money many times with larger developments. There is a hit to the municipality. The DC fund is then underfunded, and the more people that take advantage of the deferral agreements, the more of a disadvantage we're at when it comes time to draw from the reserve during the capital budget process. So I'm having some difficulty accepting the 5-year scenario that's being suggested in light of the fact that it would set a precedent. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Ferguson and then Councillor Vanderbeek.
Move an amendment that we do offer 5 years. If I can get a seconder, I'd like to speak to that. I think Councillor Johnson seconded. So, Madam Chairman, I think
Okay, well, hang just a moment. I'm going to turn to the clerk because we have a motion that's been moved and seconded on the floor.
I'm moving an amendment to that.
An amendment to change it to 5 years?
From 1 year to 5 years.
Okay, moved by Councillor, that's appropriate, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, it is an amendment to the motion.
Okay, so the amendment is moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Johnson, and Councillor Ferguson, you were the next on the speakers list.
Thank you. The reason I'm moving this amendment is, first of all, we're not waiving the DCs. They're still going to pay them. We are collecting interest on it. But more importantly, it's an emerging business, and it's a business that's taking material that traditionally went to a landfill, primarily drywall waste, and reusing it. And I'd like to do what we can to support everybody that try to divert material away from landfill, and therefore I'm supportive of going forward with a 5-year rather than a 1-year deferral.
Okay, so the motion as amended is on the floor. I'm going to continue on the speakers list. Councillor Vanderbeek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like Councillor Collins, I have a real concern about setting precedent in something like this. I just have a couple of questions for staff. Were these, because of location, were these development charges reduced initially?
Through the chair, I'm not aware that they were reduced initially. So, as far as an industrial lower rate at the time? Is that the question?
It doesn't look to me like there's been any payments made. Am I correct? Just based on this report, it looks like there's been nothing paid in the last 5 years.
Through the chair, yeah. So the agreement was due in 2015, and so we send a reminder notice that it's coming up due. So they're due to pay it now, and this is when the extension has been requested.
Ordinarily, through you, Madam Chair, ordinarily would they not pay a bit every year? Would they not ordinarily, when someone has an extension, paying them over 5 years, would they not pay in installments?
Through the chair, no. As in this deferral agreement, we've deferred it for the complete five-year period, and then they're supposed to start. They would pay it at the due date.
So it's not unusual that they would pay them all at the end of the 5 years.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
I have Councillor Johnson, Councillor Pursuit the first time, then I have Councillor Brenda Johnson second time.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. So I'm going to kind of follow up here on a couple of my colleagues' questions and comments. So through you, Madam Chair, to Brian then. So there has been no payments made since June of 2010. And is that correct?
Through the chair, correct.
And that's typical that at times for different businesses we will not take any payments, or we put it into the agreement? Or do we end up having some type of an agreement payable every year?
So through the chair, deferral agreements typically require that they be repaid after the 5-year period.
So through you, Madam Chair, do we do that a lot? Does it happen a lot? It's deferred over to 5 years?
Through the chair, I can get a list of how many times we've done it. This is deferral agreement number 122. So we've done 122 of them over the course of the city's.
Well, I'm going to be upfront here. I'm a little concerned about setting once again a precedent and doing it for 5 years. In business, some things should have been paid. Put that into your budget, you move along. Whether business is tough or not, but you should be paying some of this up in front and kind of keep yourself out of the hole here. So I'll listen to my colleagues, but I have a real concern about extending it for 5 years. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson, second time.
Thank you. Through you to Brian. Brian, if the one-year plan is put in place and the company cannot afford it, we're SOL to begin with, correct? Really? If they can't afford this plan in front of us today, they're saying they're having a hardship right now, we're going to put them on a payment plan that they're clearly saying that they cannot afford, what happens?
Through the chair, I imagine we would, we would take all of our legal recourse that is in that deferral agreement.
Okay. So if whatever plan we put on 1 year, 5 year, does it go against the property lien? Does it go on their taxes? Like, what is it that secures for this city, if we put them on a 1 to 4 or 5 year plan, that if they sell the property down the road, that debt remains and it doesn't just get just rolled up in smoke?
Yeah, through the chair, we would register it against the property.
We register it against it. So I'm still supportive of the 5 year plan. I think it's better than not having anything. And that this is something that the owner said that they could afford to pay. So I'd rather work within their affordability. So I would like to let the amendment stay, that we keep it at 5 years. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm just going to relinquish the chair just a moment to Councillor Aidan Johnson, if I could. And I do have a question, Brian, to that comment that was made. If it does get, if something did happen and it ended up being rolled onto the taxes to the property, who takes precedent on any liens on that? Is the city top priority, including with development charges?
I'd have to defer to Janice.
Through the chair, off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that question. I know certainly if they're, in most cases, it would be top priority. There are some exceptions to that. I'd have to look at that.
That would be my concern, only that I'm not sure where we stand in priority scheme. If there happens to be loans, et cetera, against the property currently, do the lenders take priority over the city and development charges? I think we do for taxes, but I'm not sure for development charges. So I do have a concern there as well. I'll take the chair back, and any other questions or comments from committee? Seeing none, we have the motion as amended on the floor.
It hasn't been amended yet. We haven't voted on the amendment.
No, she said it's on the floor.
It's on the floor. Thank you. It was
Amendment's
moved. The amendment's on the floor. It was moved by you, Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Johnson. And the amendment is to provide the 5-year payment schedule. All in favor of that amendment? Opposed? That loses. We'll go back to the initial motion. Councillor Aidan Johnson, correct? You moved it? Yes. Seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek, if I remember correctly. And that's to stand by the staff recommendation of the 1 year. And Councillor Johnson, you wish to speak to that?
To be very brief, I'm persuaded by the argument that says this sets a bad precedent. That's all I'm going to say.
Very succinctly said. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. So on that motion recommendation on the floor, all in favor?
Carried.
Carried. Opposed? Councillor Brenda Johnson's opposed. Thank you very much, everyone. So that has been dealt with. Going to move on to item 8.4. Sorry. Yep. 8.4. It's the 2014 Employee Attendance Report. Any questions or comments on that this morning? Councillor Collins?
Yeah, I was hoping that staff could provide a brief update on it, but I in particular wanted to speak to the issue of the chronic employee group, where I believe it's referenced in the report, our senior managers were going to meet with those small group of individuals that are consistently skewing the numbers year after year. And if I read that chart correctly, we're substantially down in that category. So overall, I'd like a brief summary of the findings, because there are a lot of numbers in the report. But in particular, I'd like to know about that small group that was referenced and what the plan is on a go-forward basis for that same group of individuals. And I may have other questions after.
Absolutely, I'll keep you on the speakers list, Councillor. Helen, good morning. If you'd like to provide that, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, this was probably the most notable result for us in this report. As Council will recall, we implemented the HR Business Intelligence Technology System last year, and we were able to identify the 74 individuals who had the highest rate of incidental absenteeism. We provided these names to the general managers who had direct follow-up with these employees, and you can see in the chart that's in the report, it did have a significant impact. So when we're able to provide this data to managers and they have the tools at their hands, they're in a much better position to take attention on the areas of greatest concern.
So we're into the second quarter now of 215, and I thought that computer program was giving us almost real-time information. Or has that trend continued for that same group of employees?
So through you, sorry, you did have that second part of your question, Councillor. Yes, we are continuing to monitor that group, that we have noticed ongoing improvement. Some of those individuals have gone on to significant sick absences because their absence was totally explainable by the medical conditions they had. And we continue to look at who is the next group of employees that we're going to look at, the top 10 to 20% of the employee population. And as we learn more from our data in this system, we're seeing that it's probably, the more years we have, the better we can target. And now we have 4 years of data to take a look at the highest rates of incidental absenteeism.
Thanks for that, Helen, and through you, Madam Chairman. I noticed in a number of categories we've highlighted and bolded the decreases, but the increases in some areas are not as easy to identify. Can you advise us to where we're trending in the wrong direction?
Through you, Madam Chair, the report highlights 2 different employee groups. We have our employees who are part of an income protection plan and employees who are part of a sick bank plan. So overall, our employees who receive an income protection plan, I would say the incidental absenteeism has pretty well stayed static. We did have a tough first quarter last year, but we regained throughout the year. The biggest impact there, I would say, that was positive was the impact we had on our significant sick absences, which is the bulk of the cost of the organization, and we improved in our modified sick absence, which is a good thing. On the in the sick bank plan, the incidental absenteeism stayed the same. However, you can see a notable impact from the attention the fire chief and the assistant deputies made when they used the BI tool to identify patterned absenteeism. However, their significant sick absence did go up. The area that I would say is the biggest focus for us in terms of this report going forward is in the WSIB, occupational injuries and illnesses, and we have put some interventions in place, in particular in those areas where they're highest, in our waste collection, in our paramedic services, in our lodges. And we have put in place an ergonomic strategy. We have put one of our return to work specialists on site in the waste operations. And I was just reviewing the data
from March, and we have a dramatic decrease in the number of lost time injuries in these areas where we've had significant attention. And I should call your attention that the date is wrong in the report. It said 2014 when we implemented this strategy. It was Q1 of 2015. So that'll be part of our next annual report, semi-annual report.
Thank you for that. Through you, Madam Chairman, the next report deals with, and I don't want to get into that, but there is a very clear chart that shows sick days paid per employee. And through the first 3 quarters of 2014, we were at the 8.22 number, average days per employee, which was a significant improvement over previous years. How did we end the year with that average?
Through you, Madam Chair, are you referring to the chart that's in the audit absenteeism?
Yeah.
Yes. So if you look at...
I think that's the traditional one we've reported publicly to show whether we're making progress or not.
That's correct. So what we're trying to do now is to break out the areas where management has much greater control over the absenteeism, which is the incidental. So if you look, Councillor, at the chart on page 6, it would be, if you sum the incidental and significant absence, you will see the total figures. Have I got the right chart here? On the income protection plan.
Yep, I see that one. So that's the chart I'm using in comparison to the one that's part of the audit report.
Yes.
And we were breaking out the maternity leaves and the
That's correct.
significant illnesses that individuals had.
That's correct. My understanding is that when the auditor looked at our data over the years, she was drawing the figures from previous reports. Right. We recalibrated all of the data over the last 5 years using the BI technology tool, so you will see some variability in the numbers.
Okay. So from a go-forward perspective, we're not necessarily using the Appendix A numbers as part of the audit. And again, I apologize for bumping forward to the next report, but traditionally those are the ones that we had reported publicly. You gave the presentation last year in terms of the new computer system we have, and now we're using essentially page 6 of 13 chart. Those are the new numbers, which are now the apples to apples comparators.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Have Councillor Johnson, Brenda Johnson, and then Councillor Ferguson.
Yep, thank you. As you know, this is one that's kept me interested since day one. And just to be clear, just through you to Helen, this is not union versus non-union. This is everyone globally across the corporation, correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Okay, so based on that, that's where my questions are coming from. When I look at the chart 6 of 13, and I see that in 2013, as a percent of the payroll was 3.15, we're down to just 3.0. What does the 1.5 represent? End of the day, what does that 0.15 represent in people?
I'm not sure, through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure I understand your question. So the sick as a percentage of payroll was 3.15% of the total employee population and 3% in 2014. So it's a drop in payroll. So it standardizes for changes in pay.
So the 0.15, what does that represent money-wise? Sorry. Is that the one, the total cost paid? Is that where the 0.15 comes from? Is looking at the 9222791. This is the second to last column. And in 2014, it's 9318153. But that looks like it's an increase, not a decrease.
Yes, it is an increase because in the total cost, it's looking at 2 different figures, 2 different parameters. And the total cost paid, that's the total cost paid out. But of course, over the last year, employees have, compensation has increased because of cost of living increases or merit pay. So to standardize, we are using a percentage of payroll, which allows us to look at it year over year, controlling for that, changes in compensation.
Okay, thank you. And to page 10 of 13, the modified sick absence. When you look at the distinct sick employee headcount, in 2010 was 126. In 2014, it's 227. Now, I believe this is the category where it's the gradual return to work. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And when you go further and you see the numbers that actually the return to work is about 500 cases a year you're eliminating, so meaning that you've finally successfully got them back to work, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when I look at the WSIB and I see that although that the numbers have dropped from 2013 to 2014, the amount of money has increased. Is that again due to salary increases over 1 year?
That through you, Madam Chair, is more to do with the severity of the injury or the illness, longer days off.
Okay, I'm going to have to find about that one. And long-term disability from 2009, we're going back to page 12 of 13, started off with 74 employees for long-term, now we're up to 123. That's almost doubled. Is it fair to say, or is it possible that some of those 74 are still on long-term disability in 2014, or should they have been off the charts by that point?
So through you, Madam Chair, I'm going to actually ask David Lindeman, our manager of this program, to comment on that.
Morning, David. So David, if you look at page 12 of 13, this is your table 5. Long-term disability active cases at the end of the year in 2009 was 74. In 2014, it was 123. And then when you look at the cost in the dollars, it's doubled as well, or almost doubled. So is it possible that of the 74 in 2009 could still be on the docks today, so that could be part of your numbers, or they should not even be there? This is 123 different people.
Through the chair, as far as I know, they would be different people, though there may be some that come in and out of LTD as well. Keeping in mind that the folks at the City of Hamilton who enter LTD and are permanently in that will collect those benefits to age 65. They just would be dropping off our active list. We're not actively managing them after a certain period of time.
So they're not reflective of the 123?
I do not believe so.
Okay, thank you for that. And when I go, sorry. Appendix A, when I see the very first page, 2014, when I see the number of sick occurrences and then the cost is paid more, and it looks like we've increased that amount in incidental sick absences. We went almost 300 more people have gotten sick or they've been hurt. Is Councillor Collins' point, is there a trend in any particular type of work, any type of illness? Is there something that we're seeing? Is there a pattern somewhere?
Through the chair, so just to clarify, the number of employees who are collecting income protection plan increased by, I think, about 125. So the total number of occurrences is some of those employees would have been off more than once. So the actual number wasn't 300, but there is some increases.
Sorry, I'm looking at number of sick occurrences. It could be the same, same employees, so it doesn't.
Yeah, so the next column over to the left talks about the actual head count of those employees.
Okay, so that's up about 120.
Yeah, about that.
Okay, so are we seeing any trends, as Councillor Collins was referring to earlier? Are we seeing any trends? Are we seeing any patterns coming out of any of that?
Through the chair, I think we're consistently seeing across the city, and the other chart that was in the report that talked about how we had a bad first quarter is, for the most part, the departments saw a slight increase in incidental. The only ones that didn't, corporate services was down slightly, public health was down slightly, and public works down slightly.
And thanks, David. Taking a look now, we've got 4 years of information in front of you. And you're seeing trends going up in some, you're seeing trends coming down in others. Are there just some things that we just simply cannot avoid? It's just going to have to be what it is? Or is there some room for improvement here?
So through the chair, we believe there's still room for improvement. That's why we've tried over the last couple of reports to separate the significant illnesses and absences from the incidental. So the incidental ones are the absences one day here, one day there. We think there is still some room to support those employees and to relate to our expectations as an organization on their attendance and help them to attend better. And so what we have seen is, as Helen already mentioned, in some areas where we're using the new BI tool, for example, in fire, where they've indicated those or identified those particular employees who are driving some of the statistics and sitting down and having individual meetings with them. So using the information that we have to hone in on some of those employees, and as Helen mentioned as well, developing our next list of employees to have a look at.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm going to reserve questions, please, for 8.5.
Yep, thank you. We'll get to that one. Councillor Ferguson, then Councillor Collins second.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I first want to congratulate staff. It's all part of the cultural thing to try to deal with these sick days, and they, at the very minimum, seem to have arrested it. And I think everybody agrees, though, that it's still unacceptable, and we've still got a lot of work to do. And just out of curiosity, which department still has the worst absenteeism? Is it fire? I know they were high before. I just want to confirm that.
Fire would have the highest absenteeism.
Is that a result of the 24-hour shifts that makes it tempting to call in sick? Is it a result of the type of work they do? I know I saw a report nationally where a number of fires have gone down significantly in the last 10 years. So do you have a feel for what's causing this absenteeism? Is it too tempting when there's a 24-hour shift coming up to call in sick?
My colleagues are helping me here to say that it's EMS and fire. Through you, Madam Chair, I think that's a question that is probably better addressed by the management who have the day-to-day interaction and the conversations with these employees. It's likely a combination of factors.
Okay, there's no one here from fire today. Chris?
EMS is represented here. Chief Sanderson's here, so I mean he can speak to what's going on in his division. I mean, Chief Simmons is unable to attend today, but if you want, you can ask Chief Sanderson.
My question was specifically, Madam Chairman, around the 24-hour shifts and the temptation to, call in sick because, if you're working 7 days a month, you can get that down to 6, and how we're managing that. I certainly understand the paramedic side. They're doing heavy lifting all the time. And it's similar to police. Police also have a high number of injuries on the job because of the use of force that they're required to do. I see Chris has his hand up again, Madam Chair.
I think what we can do through Madam Chair is relay the message to the chief and either through an information report address it specifically to all members of council or at a subsequent AFNA attend and explain in person so that there can be some questions asked of him. So,
as you know, Madam Chairman, there's been a lot of head scratching around these 24-hour shifts, and I know it's an arbitrary award, but we've had another arbitrary award recently which we didn't particularly agree with, and I just want to get a feel for, are these 24-hour shifts causing this absenteeism? I know that's hard to measure, but I have a lot of respect for our chief, and I like his gut feel on that. So I'd like him to at least bring back a consent item. I don't want a general information that's buried in the 200 other emails we get every day. I could send that back to this meeting. I prefer to come to the next meeting to answer questions around that, if you could.
So through you, Chairman, I can see Vicky's taking notes, so that will be relayed to him.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And my last question to you, Madam Chairman, to Helen, and I'm glad you identified it. I'm new to this committee, and so I haven't really studied these reports like I probably should have in the past. But really jumped off the page at me on page 11 was the number of lost time injuries that we have. 280 new lost time injuries last year. When I ran a construction company, which is a very dangerous business, you're working out in high-speed traffic on the 400 series highways or down deep in sewers or up high on bridges, we panicked if we had one. Now, we only had 850 employees, where you've got 7,849. So multiply it by 10, you're at 280. There's clearly a big problem here. And I was curious to know, through you to Helen, do we benchmark in the construction industry? The WSIB would constantly provide you data how you benchmark off of your competitors. Do we get that from WSIB, and is this a chronic problem through all municipalities, or is it exclusive to Hamilton, or do you need to get that information for us at a future meeting?
Through you, Madam Chair, we do have benchmarking with other municipalities. I don't have the figures top of mind right now. I don't know if David has yet. I don't know if they've been released yet for this year.
Through the chair, so we do some benchmark. The latest ones aren't there. Typically, larger municipalities where we have the same experience that they have. Some of the smaller municipalities have fewer access rates. Our statistics don't come from WSIB because being Schedule 2, they don't really keep track of our payroll and our headcount and those kind of numbers. But we do it through direct comparisons with our municipalities through two different groups.
Okay, I recall my worst year as a GM, 13 years, was 5. And at 280, and of course, I don't know what it's like in the municipal world with WSIB, but in the construction world, WSIB would either assess further costs because of high lost time injuries or give rebates. And I remember I was able to fully fund the staff of 5 through WSIB rebates. It didn't cost us anything. And so there is a significant financial advantage from my experience with WSIB to have more lost time injuries. But it's also a significant moral when you're not sending people home hurt. And so I would like to see in the future report, Madam Chairman, to Helen, if possible, how we benchmark against other municipalities and what are we paying in assessments, additional assessments over our competitors. I know in the construction industry, structures was 12% of payroll, sewer was 10, roads were 8% of payroll. And where does municipalities sit in that? As a percentage of payroll, what's our WSIB cost? And do we do weekly tailgate or toolbox training with agendas being sent out to every foreman and documents kept of what health and safety training that we're doing in the workplace to make sure that we have proper training? I recall when we had that issue with waste, and I heard Helen mention waste, that we have a high number of people in waste. I asked the question, how many people in the waste collection who were getting done at 1 o'clock had lost time injuries? Because it's just a perfect recipe where you rush, you slip and fall, you have back strains, and the answer was 32% of our employees were on some sort of lost time injury in the last year. So clearly something's off the rails in this, so it's very costly both morally and financially to do this. So I would like more information around benchmarking against other municipalities. You know, what's the average lost time injury? It says here 1.04 days is the average. I think that's not all employees. I'd like to know the average injury, how many days are lost, and get a feel for our WSIB assessment and what that's costing us to try to drill down more in this. So I'd appreciate that coming back to us. And I don't think I do the motion. I see Helen nodding that she'll provide this as just a direction from the committee. And that's all my comments now. Thank you.
And I know staff have been taking notes. Helen, yes? David, certainly.
Through the chair, I appreciate the councilor's perspective, and certainly it's a high number for us as well. It hasn't been as high as it was previously. I think we were in the 350, 360, 370 some years previously, so it has come down. Given the nature of our work, we do have a number of injuries that may or may not have to happen, but we are concentrating in certain areas. As far as the councillor wanted to know about assessment costs, we're a Schedule 2 employer, which means we pay dollar for dollar for our claims costs. We're not insurance-based. We don't pay premiums, so there's no rebate opportunity, but there's also no penalty opportunity. So the benefit for us, or the opportunity for us, is that every accident we prepare to save 100% of those costs. Because we're not paying any dollars to the WSIB for those claims. We're not paying any of the medical costs or the administrative costs. So the $5.6 million you see there is our total cost for the WSIB. And I just wanted to clarify a comment earlier on about what those costs represent. Those are the claim costs we pay during that year. So they could represent things like, for example, a retired firefighter who had a claim for the WSIB that was approved this year would go under this year's claim cost, and that could be $200,000 to $300,000 for those one particular claims.
Thank you. Councillor Collins. Collins, thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. And sorry, I had another question written down, and I didn't get to it the first time around. And it was in regards to stress and mental health issues, which are briefly referenced in this report, but in other past reports. And certainly they are issues that we probably didn't talk about 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. They really weren't part of the conversation as it relates to employee absenteeism, but we know now that it is a big issue for most organizations, and stress is, as is the saying, is the silent killer. So I'm wondering how we're coping with that and how we can start to separate those numbers out of the numbers and charts that we have in front of us to better understand how to assist our employees, whether it's through our EAP program or other measures, better training, tracking where we may have some management issues in terms of interrelationship between managers and who they supervise. How are we dealing with those issues, and is there a way to separate them, as I just suggested, from the charts that have been included in the report?
Excellent question, Councillor. Helen, any suggestions?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Firstly, mental health issues in the workplace is certainly a concern for us. And as part of our whole workplace health promotion strategy, we're focusing primarily on mental health. We cannot get diagnoses. We don't track diagnoses. We can't ask employees, what their medical diagnosis is. However, we do know from our long-term care statistics that it's right up there at the number one position. Last year, we worked with our EFAP provider, Employee Family Assistance provider, who in conjunction with Queen's University have developed a certificate program for people leaders to have a full understanding about mental health issues and when it's stress, when people are having, some work-life balance issues, the impact the employer has on an employee's mental health and well-being, as well as recognizing when you might be dealing with an employee who has a mental health disorder. This program was extremely well received in our pilot, and we're just now running it now through as part of our mandatory offerings for our leadership development pathway. I had the benefit of attending the program last week. The leaders in the program just thought it was fantastic, not only for their learnings about how to work and relate with their staff, but also for managing their own resilience and dealing with work demands. So it is certainly an important area. I know it's a very important area for our public health folks who are doing workplace wellness in our number of our organizations, and we're trying to set a good example in that regard.
Thanks for that, Helen. Is there a way to track it through the numbers? I know there's some issues there, but I mean, obviously people are calling in and providing a reason as to why they're not at work, and many times, as is now the case, it's certainly acceptable to say that I'm on stress leave or dealing with other issues, and certainly without disclosing, individual issues. There must be a way of tracking it and finding out whether we're making progress with the programs we offer or not.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think you need to leave that one with me for me to figure out what we can report and not report on in this regard, and okay. We'll bring that back. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I know they've been taking notes, councillors, so they have the directions that have been suggested today. So, seeing no further speakers, can I have a motion then to receive this report by Councillor Aidan Johnson, second by Councillor Arlene Vanderbeek. All in favour? And I did, before we finish off and move on to the next report, welcome Councillor Doug Connolly and Councillor Matt Green this morning. We're going to go on to item 8.5. Sorry, Councillor Johnson, let me just read it off. This is the audit report 2014-08 absenteeism. Did you wish staff to give any overview, or Councillor Brenda Johnson, I'll just turn to you. Questions on this?
I'm at the will of the committee if they want to hear an overview, or go right into overview, please.
Yes, please. Can you just give us an overview on this one also?
Good morning. So for a brief overview of this report, Overall, there was a total of 33 recommendations that are contained in this report for you to review today. Management agreed with 27 of the recommendations, partially agreed with 2 of them, and disagreed with 3 of them. And there's one recommendation that HR will be reviewing the feasibility of and will report their findings by the end of 2015. During the audit, several opportunities for improvement were identified. So for what the city has done so far, there's a corporate-wide attendance support program, and there are other initiatives to monitor and manage employee attendance. While several initiatives have been undertaken and new technologies have been employed, more work remains to be done. Some of the recommendations included things of raising a stronger and more extensive awareness of the HR business intelligence tool and the various reports, expanding absenteeism reporting to include all employees in short-term absences, whether covered by an income protection plan or not, reinforcing consistency and compliance in the application of the attendance support program. This would include documentation practices and timeframes for conducting employee attendance reviews, training appropriate staff responsible for overseeing absenteeism, for disability and attendance management and setting target performance measures, and conducting a reevaluation of the attendance support program to ensure that it addresses the concerns identified in the work that was conducted during this audit, and automating the departmental absence reporting into PeopleSoft HR to reduce inefficiencies of manual processing through multiple hands.
Councillor Johnson?
Yep, thank you. And Bridget, thank you very much. The one thing that, of course, you gravitate to when these reports come forward is the ones that are disagreeable between you and the party. So the one that I went to right away is on page 27 and 29, that management include emergency leave days when reviewing an employee's overall attendance, as recommended in number 10. This is something that was totally disagreeable, and it's under the Employment Standards Act. My question to you is, if a manager is leaving, I'm not going to say frontline worker, if a manager is leaving every Friday before the long weekend and calls it an emergency leave, why can't this be tracked?
Through the chair, one of our findings was also that there is not currently a policy or procedure to cover this topic. So we also identified this in the report. So it's an area that is currently not well defined in the organization.
Okay, so Bridget, how do we make this well defined in the organization?
One of the recommendations in the report was to have a policy and procedure for emergency leave days.
Okay, so through you to Bridget, if this policy came forward and it outlined all this, would that supersede what the Employment Standards Act says?
I'll leave this one to Human Resources. It's their discretion to draft and implement such a policy, so they've agreed to the recommendation to implement such a policy. It's up to them to do the interpretation so that the organization complies with the Employment Standards Act.
Okay, through you to Laura David. The Employment Standards Act, which provides the employers cannot threaten, fire, or penalize in any way an employee who takes or plans on taking an personal emergency leave. That in itself, that statement makes total sense. But if you're finding there's a pattern, is there no way we can track to find out where these emergency leaves are coming from? And isn't that all part and parcel why we got this computer system in the first place, was to catch things like this? And this is, when you look at when you read that statement, it basically says it's a one-time occurrence. I'm talking about a chronic occurrence, or something that happens on a regular basis. And I thought this whole idea was to catch these patterns.
Through you, Madam Chair, the emergency leave days, the ESA provides for 10 emergency leave days. And essentially, it allows employees the unfettered right to request an emergency leave day without warning, without any real reason for that absence. If we request that there's unique circumstances, we do have the ability to ask for supporting documentation for that request. But essentially, the ESA does allow for employees to request the emergency leave days without notice. It's very difficult for us to monitor or establish some sort of pattern and make any disciplinary
decisions as a result of those emergency leave days. We can certainly look at them as part of the bigger picture,
Right.
but to hone in on those particular days and make any, and react to it in any way is almost contradictory to the ESA.
And thank you for that, Laura. So my understanding is that these 10 days were set up for a particular reason. There was the intent behind this was to allow the employee, if something emergency comes up, they can take this without being penalized. But I also understand is we're also trying to focus on those that are taking advantage of the goodwill of this corporation that's allowing them to take those days. So how do we do that? How, as you said, can we use it for the overall picture, or is it just something that just forget it? That's 10 days, it's gone, bye-bye.
So through you, Madam Chair, we do have the ability to ask for supporting documentation depending on the circumstances. And if we are concerned about the nature of the absence, we can certainly take a look at it. I would suggest that we look at emergency leaves as part of a bigger, bigger review of an employee's absenteeism.
Right.
To focus primarily on the 10 emergency leave days may be problematic for the employer, particularly if we want to react to it in a disciplinary fashion. I think overall we can manage it, and through an employer policy, it's probably a better approach than to deal with it through the ESA or through the language in the collective agreement.
Okay, thank you for that. So, all right, so I'll let that one sit for a second. On page 19 of 29, and management agrees to this, last minute vacation requests or use of leave time to cover sick absences should not be allowed, and it's within the management's rights to agree to deny these requests. We just finished talking about a policy setup. Is this part of that policy that's going to be set up, or is this a policy that's already in existence?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have the right through language in the collective agreement primarily to refuse last-minute vacation requests subject to operational requirements.
Right.
But if we're able to approve the vacation request, we will do so. But if it's just not operationally feasible, then we do have the right to refuse that request.
And when you're saying operationally feasible, we're talking about if I want to take some last minute time off, but they need somebody to replace me and can't find that person to replace me, that's probably one of the scenarios you're talking about?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go backwards into this, sorry. One of the things that caught me right away, and I couldn't really speak to it at 8.4, but it's up in 8.5, was to capture all the employees, to make sure that, management all the way down, no matter what department it was in, and yet interestingly, on page 5 of 29, there's a chart there, and it talks about decrease in sick days, paid employee days, and in fact, you're excluding library, police, HEC 5 fire, crossing guards, and maternity absences. So going forward now, are we going to see all of those departments included?
Through you, Madam Chair, we don't report on library, police, and HEC 5, but you will see the fire, and we do monitor maternity absences as well as a separate category, but we don't lump it into the overall incidental or significant sick absences.
Okay, thank you, and for that, and through you to Helen. It only has from January to September, 9 months only in 2014. We don't have those figures to the end of December yet. It's now May.
Through you, Madam Chair, at the time that the audit was doing this report, they only had access to the first 9 months of the year. So you've got the totals in the report that was just before you in 8.4.
Okay, thank you. And just off the cuff, please, does anybody know what the actual number is for 2014?
9.91.
9.91. Okay. Thank you. So we're not going to do library, police, or HEC 5. I understand about HEC 5 because we've sold it off, or we've put it into a third party. Police, I don't understand why, but anyways, why library? Why are we not including library?
Through you, Madam Chair, library has their own HR department that does their own monitoring of absenteeism.
So can we ask, please, in the future that we have both reports in front of us? So we've got HR from library so we can also include this all city employees and then city employees. So I would like to see them all together, if that's possible.
Through you, Madam Chair, we'll see what we can provide.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions for now. Oh, sorry. Helen, at the beginning of your presentation in 8.4, you talked about two separate categories, income protection plan, and what was the other plan?
Through you, Madam Chair, it would be the sick bank plan that our firefighters have where they accumulate 1.5 days per month to a maximum of 18 days.
And this 1.5 days, this 1.5 days they can accumulate from now until the day they retire?
That's correct, to a maximum of 6 months.
Right, and that's not in this report and it's not in the 8.4 report, correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, it is referenced in the 8.4 report, the sick bank plan.
It's got the numbers in there? Because I looked, sorry. All right, we'll go take this one offline. Okay, so thank you. So we got the two separate, and it's still the firefighters that still have the sick bank plan. Nobody else has that, right? Okay, thank you. Those are my questions for now.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and through you to Bridget. Bridget, the HR Business Intelligent Tools and Technology tool, the fact that a number of our managers or supervisors were unfamiliar with the program, how does that affect the quality of the data or the information, or does it at all? Through you, Madam Chair.
It doesn't have a direct impact on the data itself. It would have an impact on the process for which absenteeism is managed in the organization. So we found that there was a lower level of awareness of the tool among people that are directly people leaders. So without that information, they're unable to apply that to the direct management of absenteeism.
I see. And that's a relatively new tool, is it not? That's the one we received a pretty in-depth presentation on. I believe it was last year at the end of 2013. That's correct. Okay.
Yes, that's correct. You received it in the first quarter of last year.
Right. Okay. The second question would be related to the people taking time off, paid to unpaid leave, I guess we would call it. Is that what's referenced in the report in terms of how that's reported through you to Bridget?
Through the chair, I believe that you're referring to item number 4, ineligible employee absence reporting. Yes, so currently the scope of the procedures for reporting an absence and returning from absence indicates that these procedures apply to all eligible employees. Ineligible employees are those that are not paid for sick time away from work, so that would be part-time, casual, and temporary full-time employees that are not included in the income protection plan.
So thank you for that, the income protection plan eligible employees, when they take time off, are they included in the global number as it relates to generating statistics and figuring out whether we're making progress or not with absenteeism?
Yes, my understanding is through the chair that they are included in those numbers in the Human Resources report.
Okay, thank you. That's my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Aidan Johnson.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to refer to page 23 of 29. I am happy to learn that, if I'm understanding, there's a push on to deepen use of PeopleSoft as an HR tool within the organization. And if I could make a statement and then a question. The reason I'm happy is when I was an employee of Legal Aid Ontario in my past life, pre-election, I observed the difference that the introduction of PeopleSoft made within legal aid when it was introduced as a tool, and that it's very easy to use. So a lot of older employees within the organization who are managers, who are not computer gurus, found reporting a lot easier using PeopleSoft. It's a very Mac-inspired platform, and even younger employees who are not computer geniuses, and I would count myself in that category, found it a clarifying tool. So one thing that's good about PeopleSoft is it lessens the degree to which the negotiation around leave time is between your direct manager and the relevant employee, and increases, if I'm understanding you, correct anything that I'm saying if it strikes you as not quite on, it increases the amount of oversight from on high, because every twitch in your docket in terms of use of time, every dental appointment, every sick day, every funeral attendance is carefully documented as what it is electronically. And it's not just your manager, with whatever relationship you have with your direct manager, that is negotiating and structuring this use of time. But there's a sense within the employee's mind and within the manager's mind that there are layers of oversight above the manager that are immediately seeing the data on a rolling basis. And it's not scary, and it's clarifying, because the employee, in a very clear numerical breakdown, has a sense of how much time she has to use for different purposes, and 0.5 of this is left, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my exclamation of happiness. My question is, could you, and I didn't get this from the report, thus the question, where are we in terms of PeopleSoft use? Are we, would you describe us as just starting down the road of effective use? Are we well down the road of effective use? So there's a starter question.
Through the chair, I can comment on item 13 on page 23 of 29 regarding the recommendation where we spoke to specifically tracking the attendance support program letters in PeopleSoft. For overall use of PeopleSoft HR in your organization, I'll leave that to management in human resources to comment on. That's more their area of expertise.
Zach Nickel from HR. To speak to the PeopleSoft point, you raised some excellent points. Right now, our PeopleSoft usage is in the collection of data, so standardizing and making sure we're tracking all those different absenteeism types that you're talking about. So when the employee is off for sick, when they're off for a doctor, when we're tracking when the emergency days happened. The BI technology that we're using sits beside PeopleSoft, and that's where we're using it to pull the data out and present it at the appropriate levels for different parts of the organization. So I think every PeopleSoft implementation to a degree is going to be different. Your experience will be slightly different than another organization, but a lot of the benefits you're talking to are the ones that we're getting out of the HR BI tool. Our ability to separate that small group of 74 employees last year and then watch their activity, the chart that you see in the previous report. We're maturing with that, but it's also a process. We're taking time.
What's the relevant challenge? And is a challenge computer illiteracy? And if so, what do we do about it?
It's a good question. This challenge is multifaceted in that we have technology challenges, and then there's people and process challenges as well. And I think audits, raise some of the process issues around the ASP program and where we need to look for improvements. There's always people challenges when we're talking about change. And so, educating people, as Dave and I go out and talk to managers around the organization, it's almost a common pattern of, at first, it's making sure they understand the data is good quality, then making sure they understand their part of the data that's specific to their area, and then we can start a conversation about improvement. And that's just natural change. With technology, our immediate challenges right now are around security and accuracy of data. And when we come to report at council, it's not impossible to get accurate data at a corporate-wide level, but when you go back and you're going to assign parts of that problem to very specific areas in the organization, you want to be accurate. These are the people that we're reporting to at the time of the absenteeism. And when you use the financial system to do that, it muddies the water. And so the work we're doing with IT right now is to really focus in and say, these are the employees that we're reporting to you at the time of events. And that's enabling us. We talked a little bit about this last year when we first presented the tool. We know the employee level absenteeism. The challenge for the last year has been understanding the absenteeism level for the staff that are directly supervising those people. and how that, with all the change of people moving around the organization and people coming in, how do you get an accurate picture of that? And you have to do that step first before we can really hold individual, supervisors accountable. So we've been working with IT for a number of months now to do that properly, rolling reports out to low-level supervisors, because a lot of this is very sensitive information. You want to make sure that that's accurately done. We're not sharing information with people that shouldn't have it, and that's the big challenge we're working through right now.
And I appreciate the comment that obviously Legal Aid Ontario as an organization is not the same as the City of Hamilton, so there are going to be differences. However, I don't want to elide and overlook the similarities. So when I got to Legal Aid Ontario as an employee, our internal system was still using a grid that was based on a Commodore 64 technology, right? And well, nothing is, thank you, Councillor, my fellow Councillor Johnson is asking me what's wrong with the Commodore 64. And the answer is nothing. I love the Commodore 64, and it was my first computer, and I love the Commodore 64. But the point is, technology has moved on. And when I heard, okay, Legal Aid is now going to be introducing a state-of-the-art Mac-based PeopleSoft technology, knowing how some of the older employees in the organization, lawyers and non-lawyers, and there's different problems with both categories, interact with the computer technology, I thought sarcastically, this is going to go well. Turns out, people found it very easy to use once the sort of psychological idea that it was hard to use and the computers are scary was overcome. And the way you overcome it is just by forcing people to use it. I mean forcing in the most, consensual possible way, right? Something I would like to see ongoing, and I know it's coming already, but frankly I'd like to see more of it with even more detail, is detailed reporting to council, to this committee, about exactly where we are on the road of effective technology training and technology implementation for tracking. And my number one concern, as I've suggested, is in my experience, it is an effective way to bust free of the prison cell, if you will, of the relationship between the employee and the direct manager, and introduce both the reality and the abstract feeling of more oversight, more cooks in the kitchen in a positive sense, into structuring employee-boss relationships. So more detailed reporting on that going down the road would be fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Second time, Councillor Brenda Johnson.
Thank you, and I appreciate those comments, because my father still refers to it as that machine. So, and just to follow up on that question that I was asking about the sick bank, I went back through 8.4, and all I can see in relation even just to the firefighters being mentioned was page 5 and page 9. I don't see anything about the sick bank. And my understanding is, that's the big white elephant in the room. And not that it's bad or good, but that it's going to have some budget implications. So I'd really like to see something that's referring more to that and more detail for that, please. Just direction going forward. Thank you.
That's it then for questions and comments of committee. Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, just one of the things after having a plan. And it looks like this was an internal audit, but it looks like Mercer was used for the short-term disability. I'm just curious, through you, John, was it Mercer that set the platform for you, or did they just do the short-term disability? This was an internal audit done by your own staff?
Through you, Madam Chair, this was our own internal due diligence to make sure that we're keeping up with best practices. So we asked Mercer to do a review of our program for us.
Okay. Of course, Mercer, I think, is probably one of the largest, not the largest in the world, human resource consultants to be using on something like this. But once again, it's a cultural shift that I know I've heard from our city manager is trying to make happen. And I want to thank them for hitting this problem head on. And as I say, we've arrested the last time, if not reduced a little bit, the absentee problem. I'm pleased to see the plan, but the proof is in the previous report. How do we measure? And I look forward to seeing continuous improvement with this plan going forward. So I fully support the staff recommendation. Thank you.
So Councillor, turn to you. You'll move the staff recommendation. Yes. Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Brenda Johnson. All in favor? Carried, everyone. Thank you very much. We're on to any motions. Seeing none today. We have no notices of motion before us. We have our general information, and that's changes to the outstanding business list. And we have, I'm going to go back to, let me see, motion. May I have a motion to remove following item 11.1 is the item Q, inspection and testing of fire hydrants and condominium properties, and that's request to remove it from the outstanding business list. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Arlene Vanderbeek. All in favor? Carried. And may I have a motion to approve the proposed new date as shown on 11.1B1, and that's the item J, audit of City Hamilton utilities. Current date shows May 25th and is being revised to August 12th, 2015. Moved by Councillor Pursuta, second by Councillor Aiden Johnson. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. We have no private and confidential today. May I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Brenda Johnson, second by Councillor Chad Collins. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff.
How's it going?
Well, I guess may see you tomorrow for Veterans Committee. Gonna see you tomorrow for Veterans Committee. Parking is the big item. And then I'll see you Wednesday for council. Maybe.